which has left the working people of this country without any defence or representation at all. A Labour Party which is a caricature of its name, which has no connection to the British working class, in fact doesn't even like them very much. And the British working people are repaying the compliment. The British people have fallen out of love with Labour. It's time for change.
I'm George Galloway. I'm the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain. Every week at this time, I'm bringing you our perspectives on the great national and international issues of the day. I hope that you like what you see and hear and that you will consider joining us. But even if not yet, then you will follow us on our social media portals so that at least you're always aware that this point of view exists and a home for you is always waiting. There are only two subjects that we have time to deal with today. First of all, Prince Andrew, Her Majesty the Queen's favourite son, has just paid £12 million sterling to somebody he never met. He never sweated with. He never danced with in a nightclub. As a matter of fact, at the moment in question that this was alleged, he was in Pizza Express in Woking, as princes of the royal house are fond of doing. He did not have sex with that woman. As a matter of fact, he'd never set eyes on her. And that picture of him with her in Ghislaine Maxwell's flat in London, well, I don't know if you could call it a flat, a mews in London, was a fake. It was a photo of a photo of a photo. He was determined, wasn't he, to have his day in court to prove this woman that he now describes as a brave campaigner to be an inveterate liar. He was determined to clear his name in court, wasn't he? And his mother was going to pay the legal bills. He was going to fully cooperate with the FBI until he didn't. And now he's paid £12 million in hush money. Money that, of course, originates with the British people themselves in order to stop the court case going any further. You'd need a heart of stone not to laugh in some ways, but the whole Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, Prince Andrew, President Clinton, Prime Minister Ehud Barak nexus is far from a laughing matter. This nexus was involved in the systematic, industrialized collection of children for the sexual edification of rich and powerful people, with Epstein videoing it in order to use the evidence later. The procurer, according to the New York courts, was Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of the monster, Robert Maxwell. If you want to go on my Patreon page, you can see a mini documentary I've made about that. This nexus of perverts and spies has not yet fully been exposed, and some brave and courageous people will continue to try and do it, however much money is thrown at the subjects of the sexual exploitation. Now, I mention all of that not just because, well, you'd have to have a heart of stone not to laugh, as I said, that you'd pay somebody £12 million when you've never even met them. As a matter of fact, I understand there's a queue outside Buckingham Palace right now of women that Prince Andrew has never met, but who are hoping that he'll settle with them too. He's never met me, as a matter of fact, so maybe I can make a claim also. It's not just that it is a good tabloid gossip story. It's because, just for an accident of history, of chronology, Prince Andrew could have been the heir to the British throne. Prince Andrew, rather than Prince Charles, could well have been waiting in the wings to become the unelected head of state for Britain for the rest of his natural, and one of his children after him. That's why we in the Workers' Party say this system of monarchy is simply bonkers. We cannot possibly entrust the future of our country, the captaincy on the deck of our national ship, to go to anyone who might, but for chance, turn out to be like Prince Andrew. If you think about it, what I'm saying is simple common sense. If Princess Anne had been the firstborn, she might have, with aplomb, taken the British monarchy onwards after the eventual, of course, demise of Her Majesty the Queen. But at the time that she was born, that couldn't have happened anyway. It would have gone to her brother, Charles, who's also now under police investigation. What a country, Britain. Our Prime Minister's under police invesigation, and so is the heir to the British throne. In the case of Prince Charles, he's under police investigation under the Cash for Honours legislation, following allegations that in exchange for filthy lucre from a Saudi Arabian billionaire, an honour was promised to the said seedy Saudi Arabian billionaire in exchange for his very handsome transfers of cash. Now, as I've said before, the question of a republic or a monarchy does not depend on the qualities of the royal family. We've been very lucky in Britain. The Queen has rarely, if ever, embarrassed us in any way, but all of our children, all of them, have embarrassed us at one point or another. And who knows what embarrassments lie ahead in the closet for Prince Charles, who is the heir to the throne. I don't know if Prince Charles is guilty of a crime or one of his underlings will take the rap, but it is a pretty powerful piece of evidence in support of our demand that when, in the fullness of time, Her Majesty the Queen faces the inevitable demise that all of us will face, there should be a referendum in Britain on the future of the monarchy. We might decide, probably would decide, to continue with the monarchy. I'm not suggesting I'm speaking for everybody in the country on this. But in a grown-up country, we should at least have the right to decide whether we want to continue with this system or not. A system that produced Prince Andrew, produced Prince Charles, produced Queen Camilla, as we've now been told in defiance of earlier promises we must call her. I myself am not prepared to call Camilla Queen Camilla. I did pledge 5, 6 times in the House of Commons my allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen. I had to, or I wouldn't have been allowed to sit in the seat in the House of Commons to which the public had elected me. I wouldn't have got paid either. But it's got to be said that on the passing of Her Majesty the Queen, we need to have a long, hard think about this. Not just whether or not we should have a monarchy, but whether we should have instead a democracy. A democracy in which we pick the head of state. Maybe not directly, although if there is a direct election, let me throw my hat into the ring right away. We should perhaps pick a non-political, titular head of state, a token head of state, who only cuts ribbons, and that we don't have to pay a very, very substantial number of millions of pounds every year in order to sustain a president that just goes round spreading goodwill, has absolutely no role in politics, not lobbying the parliament over laws, not seeking exemptions for themselves to enrich themselves still further, and above all, not passing it on to their firstborn child, whatever qualities that firstborn child has or doesn't have. I think we should go for democracy myself. I think we should abolish the unelected upper house of the British Parliament. Replace it, if we decide to, with an elected Senate, either directly or indirectly elected. We should have a system of voting where everyone votes, everyone has to vote and can vote none of the above if they like, and in which the votes are counted fairly, and in which every vote is as valuable as another vote. In other words, if you're a Tory in a rock-solid Labour seat, your vote is virtually worthless. If you're a Labour supporter in a true blue Tory seat, your vote is virtually worthless. If we had proportional representation, like they do in most countries in Europe, indeed in the world, then we'd have a parliament that we could truly call democratic. So on this day, this red letter day, in which at one and the same time Prince Charles is under police investigation and Prince Andrew has just stumped up 12 million quid to somebody he never met, never danced with, never sweated with, I think it's time to restate our case for a referendum on the future of the monarchy and British democracy. The other issue is perhaps equally obvious. Again, one doesn't know whether to laugh or cry, because at 1 o'clock this morning there was a mass invasion of the Ukraine by Russian forces after a massive bombardment across the border lasting several hours. 200,000 Russian soldiers with snow on their boots swarmed over the Ukrainian border and installed, I give you this courtesy of the Sunday Times and British intelligence, a puppet regime in Kiev. They even gave the names of those who were to lead that puppet regime. We would already, according to the front page of the Daily Mirror, now be into a European war between hypersonically nuclear superpowered Russia and the nuclear superpower of the United States of America. I know all this because I read it, didn't you? I know all this because I heard it, didn't you? Over and over and over again until we could not bear to hear it anymore. Russia was imminently about to invade Ukraine until it didn't. It was about to pour its soldiers over the Ukrainian border until it actually began to withdraw them back to their barracks. What is this farce, this hoax, this highly dangerous tidal wave of guff tell us about our rulers and tell us about the mass media at their disposal? What does it tell us about the proliferating think tanks hidden behind hedges of acronyms, their finances equally well shielded, who brought us the impartial analysis that the media echoed and the political class acted on? What does it tell us about that something which is rotten at the heart of the NATO alliance, and in particular of the United Kingdom and the United States of America? Because when Ben Wallace, who's apparently Britain's defence minister, said there was a whiff of Munich about the last couple of weeks, I struggled to understand what he meant. Firstly, because Munich was the Chamberlain-Hitler pact. Munich was the Britain-Nazi-Germany pact to dismember Czechoslovakia, after having promised Czechoslovakia that we would not allow Hitler to devour it. So I wondered why a British Conservative minister was bringing up Munich, as it was the British Conservative Party that actually carried out the betrayal of Czechoslovakia and of Europe and of world peace in the Chamberlain-Hitler Pact. And in this case, it was Germany that didn't want the war with Russia. It was Britain that was gagging for the war with Russia. So where does Munich come in to all of this? I'll tell you what there is, though. There's not the stench of Munich, but there is the stench of Nuremberg. Because as has even now begun to break into the mainstream right-wing media, in the Daily Mail yesterday, we are in a fully fledged political, military, and strategic alliance with a Ukraine which is infested with actual Nazis. Let's talk about the babushka, the granny that was pictured on every front page and featured in every news bulletin. An old grandmother lying on the ground, learning how to fire an automatic weapon that she was going to turn on the Russian invaders that never were. No editor looked closely enough, I hope, at the shoulder pads of the militiaman that was teaching the old granny how to fire, because if they had, they would have seen Nazi insignia on his shoulder. The people that were putting this whole operation together were a part of the Nazi hordes that infest the Ukraine. And they're not hiding it. They openly sport their swastikas and their death's head SS insignia. Or the young woman, the sniper, that was featured in another British newspaper. Nobody looked very closely at her either. All they had to do was look at her Facebook page. Elementary, you might have thought, before trying to make her an international heroine. That young woman believes that gay people should not be allowed to sit at the same table as straight people. That woman believes that Adolf Hitler was a hero and that they should build a statue to Adolf Hitler in Kiev. That's the kind of people that have become our friends. This immoral principle of my enemy's enemy is my friend has already gotten us into so much serious trouble in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya and Syria, and many other places, and nearly helped talk us into a new European war against the superpower of Russia. Your enemy's enemy isn't necessarily your friend. Sometimes your enemy's enemy is worse than your enemy, unless you're going to say to me that the followers of the Ukrainian Nazis who massacred Ukrainian Jews and Polish Jews and Ukrainian nationals who were not Jews and Polish nationals who were not Jews, who packed onto the cattle trucks hundreds of thousands of Jews from Poland and Ukraine to the death camps of Auschwitz and others. Unless you're saying to me that your hatred of Vladimir Putin is such, you are ready literally to sleep with Satan himself, then you better take a second look at who our friends and allies are in that part of the world. Of course, it all turned out to be balderdash. And that tells you a lot about the political class that we've got and about the media echo chamber that does the job of drum beating us all into a war psychosis. It is something that is peculiar to the Anglo-Saxon world. It exists elsewhere, but it is particular to the Anglo-Saxon world. Germany and France didn't want anything to do with war with Russia. It was Britain and the United States that was gung-ho for war with Russia. It was us, our media, that mounted wave after wave, this tidal wave of guff that I speak about. How imminent it was, what it was going to consist of, even which hour it was going to be launched on, and it was all a lie. Somebody asked me just yesterday, was it all a dream? No, it was a nightmare. But it was a nightmare that we did our best here in Britain and in the US to make into a reality. It wasn't a dream. It was a pack of lies. And this is my last point. I understand how easy it is for people who don't follow every twist and turn to be swept along by this tidal wave of guff, and to imagine that all these people cannot be telling the same lie all at the same time. Well, of course, they were, and moreover, they have. You didn't need to look in the crystal ball. You could see it in the book of the Iraq WMD story. The same people who lied to you over and over and over again, and whom in your own lives you know to be liars. Some of you are supporters of Boris Johnson. You know they're lying about Boris Johnson. Some of you are opponents of Keir Starmer, like me. You know they're lying about Keir Starmer. You know that they're lying about many things, Brexit, many things in your own life. So why do you imagine that they're telling you the truth about Russia, about Ukraine? But you do know one source that was right then and is right now. You do know one person that told you the truth back then and is telling you the truth right now. You know that person. And I'm now the leader of a very fast growing body of men and women in Britain who have decided to come together, always to tell the truth and to fight for the rights of workers. I hope that you'll join us. If you can't yet, then at least you will follow us and you'll spread the word that these broadcasts on a Wednesday evening at 8 o'clock are well worth watching. I've been George Galloway for the Workers' Party of Britain. You have been a wonderful audience. Thanks for watching.